You're listening to The Women in the Arena. I'm your host, Paige Rene, former collegiate athlete turned leadership entrepreneur for women just like you. Each week, I'm bringing you a new person or message to help you expand and elevate into the woman you know you're meant to be. Now, let's step into the arena. Okay, you guys, we are stepping into the arena with none other than Jordyn Wieber Brooks. As of 3 months ago, are you even using Brooks yet?
Legally, I am Jordyn Wieber Brooks. Professionally, I'm still Jordyn Wieber, but you can go with either. I don't mind.
Okay, awesome. I really appreciate you being here because I know this is a really crazy busy time for you guys, just getting back into season. And I think you're coming off of a retreat. So thank you very much for making this time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So those of you listening, if her name sounds familiar, it's probably because she's a freaking gold medalist. She was part of the Fierce 5 gold medal winning U.S. women's gymnastics team at the 2012 Summer Olympics. And she was a 2-time U.S. all-around champion in 2011 and 2012, and the 2011 World All-Around Champion. And honestly, is a ton. If you go to her Wikipedia page, it lists everything out. So you can go check that out for yourself. But Jordyn is, or Coach Wieber Brooks, is currently entering into our 5th season as the head gymnastics coach for the Arkansas gymnastics program. And you took the job at 24. And I still remember your opening speech because our offices were right across from each other. And I think it's so crazy that not only that, you're the first Olympic gold medalist gymnast to take the head coaching reins as the head of a collegiate program. And it's literally like you're living life in the fast lane. If you think about it, you went from competing to the Olympics to a volunteer coach to a head coach. That is wild. You are in the fast lane. So take us back to when it clicked for you that you could really be a force in this sport. Do you remember when that was?
Yeah. I'll go back just for a second. I actually was 23, not 24, which is it's weird to even think about because it feels like yesterday, but I'm 28 now. And when you say it very much feels like the fast lane, that's exactly how it feels. I've always felt like that in life. Growing up in gymnastics, it's like you grow up at a very young age because you're doing very adult things very young. By the time I was 11, I was on the U.S. national team and competing internationally. And even just thinking back, like I was 11 years old, I have like nieces and nephews now, and just thinking about some of the stuff I was doing at that age, it's crazy. But I'm just really grateful that I've been able to be in spaces that have empowered me to be ready to take on a head coaching position and feel confident enough to do that. And not to mention just having a great mentor and great people along my journey that have believed in me and pushed me and challenged me and got me out of my comfort zone. And that's, ultimately how I got to this position now, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, I think all of Arkansas is really grateful too. I think that's just really awesome. And thanks for correcting me on that. Oh my gosh, 23. If anybody listening is 23 or thinks back to themselves at 23, can you imagine taking over as a head coach? I'm sure it's pretty wild for you to think back on that time too.
It is. And honestly, my whole mindset going into that, like you said, I was a volunteer coach for 3 years and then interviewed and was offered the head coaching position here. I am very aware I'm not going to know how to do everything. I don't know most things about being a head coach. I knew some things because of my experiences and observing with the program I was at before this, but I definitely had never done a lot of it before. I hadn't even been a full-time assistant coach. And so my whole mindset was, all right, I know I don't know everything, and that was important for me to acknowledge and recognize. But I had the confidence that I would be able to figure it out and use my resources and trust that I had all the right stuff in my heart and my brain and inside of me to figure it out in the long run and do right by my student athletes. So I've honestly kept that mindset every single day because I'm still young and I'm still learning. But I feel like when you have that confidence but lack of ego at the same time, those are the most successful leaders that I've ever known. So I try to think about that every day in my career.
Oh my gosh. I knew I hit the jackpot when you said yes to being on this podcast because that's exactly where it was going to go next. I was literally going to say, as somebody who was an athlete, especially instill in somebody else, to lead somebody else to believe in themselves. So let's first start with when you were competing, what was it that you leaned back on? If you think about coming back home to yourself, despite things in the media, despite challenges, what was it about that you would come back to with yourself to find your place at home or find that belief in yourself when it felt very externally ungrounded?
Well, I think gymnastics fueled these qualities in me of being really competitive, first and foremost. I feel like maybe I was born that way a little bit, but then the other part of it was just gymnastics brings that out in you. And also just the way I was coached, it was being the best and being at the top of whatever room I was in, whether it was that we were doing a conditioning test or we were in a competition. Like it was my goal always going in to just do my best. But when you say, what did I lean back on? I think thinking about it, it was always preparation. It was what was the work that I put in to get to that point. And for me, I was arguably always one of the most prepared athletes in the room. I did the most conditioning and the most flexibility. And I don't know everything that every other athlete did, but I definitely felt that way. I felt like no matter what, I had done the work, I had done the numbers, I had done what I needed to do mentally and physically and emotionally to just go up into a competition and truly have fun and just trust my training. And so when people ask me about competition as an athlete, I always say I was never nervous. And it's really weird to say that, but when I look back and really process it, I think maybe I could have been nervous, but I translated it and I really pushed myself to translate that feeling in my body and brain as excitement rather than nervousness. And, I've learned enough about psychology to know like the process in the brain chemically is exactly the same. And it's really a choice to view it as excitement versus nervousness. And so I kind of just lived that my whole gymnastics career. And it's got me to a place now where I'm able to approach life in the very same way. And now I'm trying to teach my student athletes that same lesson for sure.
Yeah, that's just so fascinating to learn. And I knew we connected on like our love for the Enneagram and psychology and things that when we had been talking more often. And it's just so cool to hear you say that. When you go back to confidence, it is interesting because when I work with younger athletes, I'm talking about like ninth to 12th grade, what I hear them say really often is not in a cocky way, but it's like this idea of cocky and confident is almost like they confuse the definitions. And what I find so fascinating is like confidence isn't having everything figured out. It's trusting that you can figure it out. It's like trusting in your ability to move through things, even if you're not going to do it successfully the first time. You just have that ability to like keep moving. And so I think that's always just such an interesting concept. Going into question number 2 about confidence and about belief, how do you instill that in a team? Like you're coming into a program, you're completely taking it over. I was with Courtney when she took over the program, like from an observing perspective, like that is a task. So what have you learned about instilling that belief or like a winning mentality in your athletes?
The number one thing I've learned is it doesn't happen overnight as much as I want it to. And I actually, my first year here, going back to talking about, I didn't know it all. One of the first things I did was hire a leadership coach because I felt like I needed some extra help figuring out how I was going to approach all of this. And the program when I got here was in a really good place. It wasn't in a great place, but there was a good foundation to build from. But culturally, there was things that I was going to do differently than the previous staff did. The one thing this leadership coach kept reminding me was meet them where they're at and build from there. And so that's one of the main things I've learned as a coach is change, especially in culture. And especially in building confidence in a human being, it does not happen overnight. It is an accumulation of a ton of really small things. We like in our program, we like to call them inches. Like it's all the inches that add up. I feel like that's from a movie and I can't remember which one off the top of my head. I think it's Any Given Sunday. There's a speech that he gives in the locker room about inches. But anyway, I think it doesn't happen overnight and just little by little finding ways that we can make the culture stronger. And every year, it's funny, we just got off of our team retreat. Every year, I like process the differences each in positively that we see in the team retreat, even just in the engagement of the athletes and their willingness to buy in. And they're passionate about improving our culture and our leaders on our team. So it's not an overnight thing and culture doesn't grow in a year even. It takes many years, but I'm just really excited about the progress we've made so far. And same thing goes for confidence. For a gymnast, it's my job as a coach to give them a plan that's going to help them prepare their routines. But then it's up to each athlete to figure out what is that mental preparation they need to do to be able to handle those high pressure moments. I mean, you're standing in front of 15,000 fans on a 4-inch piece of wood that's 4 feet off the ground. Okay, now balance and do all these flips and land and don't wobble. That is a big task for any athlete, but that's their challenge is figure out not only do I have the skills gymnastically, the flexibility, the power, the balance, all of that, but how do I handle it up in my brain and manage it and calm my heart rate? That's their challenge every year with preseason is to figure out how do I simulate those pressure situations and then be able to thrive when I'm in them.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch the athletes perform. That's probably the second most competitions I've been to is gymnastics. And every time somebody goes to perform a stunt or is on beam, I'm tense, I'm just like, okay, you got it. Like, so crazy. Going back to your leadership coach, like, this is obviously so fascinating for me. What made you want to hire one? I think that you touched on that. And then where did you find that resource?
I'll start with the second part. The leadership coach that I hired is someone that I knew previously. He actually worked with a couple head coaches that I knew during my time at UCLA. He worked with Valerie Kondosfield, who was the gymnastics head coach there, as well as the softball coach, and worked with both of them the year that they both won a national championship in 2010, I believe. You can correct me on that. You probably know your softball better than I do, but I'm pretty sure they both won a national championship around the same time, and both of them worked with this leadership coach. His name is Foster Mobley. He owns his own leadership coaching business and company with other executives. That's mainly what he does, is work with executives, CEOs, management teams, things like that. And when I was in college, before I knew I wanted to coach, I actually wanted to be a leadership coach. And so I actually did an internship with his company in the summer down in San Diego and learned a ton. A lot of it was more about the business world, but they used the tools like the Enneagram and FIRO-B. If you haven't heard of that one, that's an incredible one for leaders as well. He also would come in and work with our coaching staff. And so he'd sit down with us at the beginning of the year and say, okay, let's use the Enneagram, but let's talk about what you guys need as a coaching staff and what your strengths and weaknesses are and what you need from each other to be the best version of yourself and what you believe about excellence and what your values are. And then come together as a coaching team, just the same way we want our team to come together. That was my experience before. And so I knew that was going to be valuable to me and my coaching staff, especially being the first time I've ever been a head coach, put a staff together, figured out how to not just manage a team, but manage a whole staff of coaches as well. So that was really helpful. And then each week he came out and worked with us a couple times. I actually went out to his house and did a head coach retreat for a weekend and got myself organized and really figured out what is my system of meetings that I'm going to do? What is my system of communication? Like, how am I going to really interact with the people around me and give them feedback and manage it from a leadership standpoint. And then he came out and worked with our team as well, did the Enneagram with them, which was great. And then throughout the whole year, I had weekly calls where I just talked about things that maybe I was struggling with as a leader and talked it through and figured out what I needed to do moving forward.
Yeah, I think that what you are saying is so powerful because you're a retired athlete now and you wouldn't do your sport without a coach. And I think a lot of times people, women especially in this network, are trying to navigate these really tough things and feel a lot of weight on their shoulders and feel like they have to do it all themselves. And it's not weak to ask for help. It's really smart, advantageous, and it's efficient. And so I love that you're saying that. It's like when talking to an Olympic gold medalist who asked and hired a leadership coach to do another aspect of your career. And I think that's so valuable. So thanks for sharing that with us. Tell me a little bit about your leadership style. We've been on trivia teams together and I know how competitive you are. So I know that's a piece of what makes you great and what I'm sure your athletes feel from you. But how do you lead yourself? Because when I think about leadership, I always think about leading yourself first in order to lead others. Like you made sure you had a mentor in order to lead yourself, in order to lead your teammates and your staff. How do you look at your leadership style? Or if someone's to ask you that, how do you describe that?
For me, it wasn't something that going into a head coaching position I had completely dialed in. It's definitely been something as I learn what being a head coach requires and entails, but my foundation has remained the same. What I believe as a coach is that gymnastics is a tool for me to teach life lessons through sport. I'm really passionate about that. As a leader, I'm intense, but I'm also incredibly empathetic. And so for me, yeah, it's about gymnastics. And at the end of the day, we want to go out and compete and win meets and do well as gymnasts. But more than that, I care that they are developing as human beings and growing during their time here. That is what success is for me as a coach, is do they leave my program having learned more about themselves, about leadership, about relationships, about how to work with other people? And are they going to take those lessons into life after college? And yeah, it's pretty fun if you can win some meets along the way. And ultimately, that's what I'm here to do, is to grow the program. I really think that's a great way to do it. I think when human beings are supported and empowered, they are ultimately going to be better athletes and better students. Like even on our retreat this weekend, we talked about what we want to achieve as a team, but we also talked about what standard and lifestyle do we want to live as people? Even as far as like I asked them, look at your screen time on your phone and how much time are you spending on social media versus when you could be meditating or studying or reading a book or whatever, and just challenging them to be the best versions of themselves, whatever that looks like for them. And they all come in at different levels and different levels of maturity. So it's definitely interesting. But yeah, I would say it's passionate, intense at times in a positive way, but I try to be as empathetic as I possibly can. I love learning about people and what motivates them and then figuring out how I can challenge them to be better.
Yeah, I would imagine if you're interested in being a leadership coach, that sounds right in line with all of that. That's really cool. What was the transition from wanting to be a leadership coach and then deciding, actually, I think I might coach the sport that I've been incredible at?
My journey through college was a little different than the average gymnast. So before NIL was around, we had to choose between going pro or doing college gymnastics and using your eligibility. And so when I was 16, I decided to go pro and couldn't do college gymnastics. But at the time, I really wanted to go to UCLA, and I really ultimately was attracted to being a part of a team. And everything that was about, I really loved the head coach at UCLA, Miss Val, because I recognized that if I was going to be around her and I was going to spend 4 years with this program, I was going to grow as a person. I was going to learn a ton. And so I called her when I was making that decision and said, hey, can I still come to UCLA and be a part of the team in some way? And she's like, yeah, for sure. You can be a team manager. And I'm like, great, sign me up. I had no idea what a team manager did. I had zero clue. I showed up on the first day. I'm like, all right, what does a team manager do? And she's like, well, you chalk the bars and move the mats and do the laundry and basically whatever anybody else doesn't want to do, like the grunt work, you're going to do it. And I'm like, sweet. And so here I was, like 1 year fresh off the Olympics, Olympic gold medalist. And these are the things that I was doing. I did that for 3 years for the UCLA program. I was a team manager. But along the way, I was in every team meeting. I was learning a ton about gymnastics, like collegiate team culture, and at a really, really successful program with a really successful head coach. And I was getting this like bird's eye view of how a program functioned and worked as a team manager. So that was really cool. And then long story short, my senior year, their volunteer coach had left, and Val came to me and said, do you want to be our volunteer coach? And I'm like, I didn't really want to coach. I don't know if I really want to spend the rest of my life in the gym. I've been in the gym my whole life. But at the end of the day, I said, you know what? I've been a team manager for 3 years. And if this is something that like will be different and new and could challenge me potentially, let me try it. And so that's really why I started coaching. It must have been a month or two before I was like, yep, this is something I really love doing. It happened that quickly because I realized what I thought coaching was before was very different than what coaching actually is. I thought it was more about technique and planning and the actual gymnastics, which it is that, but it's so much more, especially at the college level. It's more about they've already got the skills. Now it's about preparation and mental coaching and bringing a team together and figuring out how to get them on the same page. Like all of that was what I really loved about it. Within a few months, I remember saying to Miss Val at her house one night, like, all right, I think I want to be a head coach someday. And she's like, all right, let me help you figure it out. And so I ended up getting opportunities to go be an assistant coach at other schools and actually turned them down because I wanted to stay at UCLA and continue learning from Miss Val and everything that she knew and built, and knew she was going to be retiring soon. So I was like, let me soak up every bit of knowledge that I can in that time. And, you know, super grateful I had the financial means to be able to remain a volunteer coach because it's not easy not to get paid, but I wanted to just take advantage of that while I could. And then that prepared me to be able to be ready to take on a head coaching role.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I love, love, love hearing people's stories and like how they got to where they are, because I think one thing is always the same is there is this drive to follow something that you really love. For you, you knew it was like leadership and personal development, also developing people and gymnastics. And so it was like, whether you were thinking about it consciously or subconsciously, you just kept following that nudge and you kept following that inner voice, if you will. And I think sometimes that's really hard for people and for women in particular, because it's second guess myself, or who am I to want to go for this opportunity? Or I'm 23 and I'm going for a head coaching job. And to be able to question yourself in that situation comes a lot easier than for you to see the magic of the moment or what might happen on the other side, because that's not as tangible. And so I just think that's so fascinating. Let's go into more personal, not more fun, because I think this is very fun, obviously, but just more on the personal side of things. What have you really enjoyed about your lifestyle as a head coach? Because obviously you are married to your sport, and with the transfer portal and just the growth of collegiate athletics in general, it's a lot of demand on your time. How have you learned to enjoy your lifestyle as a head coach?
Yeah, I think you said it. Being a head coach is a lifestyle. It is not a job. And so you really have to know that going into it. I think it's definitely something I didn't know fully, but I've learned. And to be honest, it really fits my personality. I love working. If I have a day off, I'm usually like feeling guilty that I'm even taking a time off, which is something I'm also working on. But I think it really feeds that piece of my personality that just loves doing things and accomplishing things and finding ways to do that and grinding. I've always loved that. And it's all I've ever known. Literally, when I started gymnastics at 4, I've been nonstop working hard and I love that. So it truly is a lifestyle. I also get to work with my significant other. He's my assistant coach. A lot of people ask like, oh, how does that work? How is that going? And I'm like, to be honest, it's awesome because we communicate really well and we get to spend time together. If I didn't work with my significant other, I think I would probably wish I had more time with them. And so that kind of fits as well. And we really balance each other out and really complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. So that's another piece of it that I really like is we get to do this thing together and we have different strengths. So that's part of every head coach's challenge is to identify their weaknesses and then build their staff to be able to fill in those weaknesses for sure.
You guys, when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, I had very few examples of women in leadership positions. And sometimes when I shared what I was building with my friends or with my coworkers at the time, they just didn't really get it. Even when I wanted to create some new goals and talk about those ambitions, I didn't feel like I had a community of women to share that with, which is why I found an online community of other multi-passionate, like-minded women. If you can relate, join us in our Rise Facebook community where you get free weekly coaching, a network of amazing women who are also in the arena, and you're the first to know about the latest offers. Women leaders rise together. See you inside our Rise Facebook community. You can find the link in the show notes. Yeah, you can definitely tell that you guys are yin and yang, and just knowing you is really cool. And I'm sure doing more leadership work and working with the Enneagram, you've learned more about each other too. It's almost like marriage counseling all the time. Peyton and I just finished marriage counseling and I'm like, man, thinking about if we were in your shoes and working together, I was like, we'd have to get this stuff quickly. Thanks for sharing that. What is something about you that you think people are surprised to learn? And I asked that question because I was sharing with a group of people who I was getting to interview today, and I was really excited about it. And I hear often that, oh, she's so intimidating. And I'm like, yeah, and she's really awesome. So I just wanted to know what you think surprises people to learn about you.
Yeah. I was actually going to say that because on the surface, people see I've got like a very serious face. And like I said, the word intense earlier, like I've always been like that. Literally since I was a toddler, my mom would tell me that you were just intense about everything. Like whether it was putting your clothes on, or I would cry if my carpool picked me up late for practice because I was invested in what I was doing. And so I'm just an intense person. And I really think it's because of my passion for what I do and what I love to do. So I think people would be surprised once they get to know me. People realize that I'm a very like deep human. Like I love getting to know people and learning about them, and especially people that are different from me and don't think the same way that I do. I think that's really amazing. So I think people would be surprised to know that I'm not this tough exterior. There's a lot of depth and empathy and compassion to me and in my relationships with the people around me.
Oh, yeah. I would 100% agree from the time that we've gotten to spend together. So I think that's a really cool thing for you to share, because I do feel like you do have that intimidating exterior, and also just knowing how much you love the sport and how serious you are about being a really successful head coach, and success, in your words earlier, you saying how our athletes develop as humans is a really big part of that.
And I think too, like for all women, I've been told so many times, you're really intimidating. And someone told me once that if someone is intimidated by you, it's usually their issue, not yours. It's like they're intimidated by you instead of you are an intimidating person. Unless it's like obviously an abusive situation and you are purposely trying to intimidate somebody. But if someone is just intimidated by your presence, it's usually their issue, not yours. And so I think it's good for all women to know it's not a negative thing to be intimidating. It probably means you carry a level of confidence, and that's ultimately a positive thing. So I try to remind my student athletes of that sometimes too. It's not necessarily negative.
No, oh my gosh. And you know what's so funny is when you're saying this, I'm remembering when I was in the dating world, that was like a story that I was carrying around. I was like, oh, I'm just like a dominant presence sometimes, especially in my work life. And I felt like I was intimidating to other guys, but hearing your definition of it, it's okay, well, in reality, that's probably because they weren't the best match for you. And so I love that you just said that. I'm just like, wow, that could have clicked a long time ago. Okay. I have one more question about just taking us into kind of the weeds. So when you took over the program, and it was tougher probably than you imagined, like with the cultural piece of it, and then just like figuring out what you didn't know, which you said you just don't know what you don't know. And so, was there ever a moment when you were just like, I don't want to call it a rock bottom moment, but like a moment where you were just like, oh my gosh, it's really hard to see a way through. It's really hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Did you ever experience that? In that, what do you lean back on?
Yeah, I think I felt that a little bit, especially not necessarily in the beginning, because in the beginning, you feel like you can impact things quickly. And a lot of times people are apprehensive with change, but majority of people are like super excited by it. And they're like, oh, things are new, things are different. And that is fun. And I think the first couple of years, we really felt a lot of that, especially from like the fan base and the team. And then like years 3 and 4, you really start seeing like some of the cracks in the foundation that really need to be repaired. And some of it is like leftover culture that they learned from leaders prior, whether it be teammates or coaches or whatever. And so that's really like, those have been the harder moments for me, is just wanting to impact every single piece of the culture, but knowing that like some of it is a little bit out of my control, and just letting time take care of some things. And for us, it's like when we recruit, we're looking for people that have a similar mindset that we do. And when we get them here, the buy-in is so much stronger from the get-go, because they signed up for what we offered. And I think through COVID and just all of those challenges, it really tested my leadership. But I don't know, I just sit here and I'm grateful for every single, whether it feel like a rock bottom moment, or I just feel like being a head coach goes like this sometimes. I'm grateful because I wouldn't learn anything. It wouldn't challenge me as a leader if it was only a positive trajectory. We've got to experience these really tough moments in order to figure out, what do I need to do when that happens. It sucks in the moment when you're going through something really tough or have to make a really hard decision as a leader. But that's ultimately when you learn and when you grow and when you stretch as a person, is when you're challenged. And so I try to be really grateful for those moments. And the longer I do this, the less I let them stress me out quite as much as I did initially, especially COVID. Like that was really hard my first year as a head coach to deal with that. But again, I just leaned on the people that were giving me really good advice of, hey, have your team focus on what they get to do instead of what they don't get to do, and really develop like a culture of gratitude. And now like gratitude is one of the things my student athletes, like they ask me, hey, can we do this gratitude exercise? And I'm like, yeah, I love that they think of it now before I do. So that's really rewarding for sure.
That's so great. Yeah. I think sometimes that there gets to be this like idea of toxic positivity, or this idea of, oh, isn't that woo woo to practice gratitude? And it's, if you really look into it, you could probably use a lot more grateful thoughts that actually help you feel better so that you perform better. That's the whole basis behind why essentially I started my business, because I was a student athlete and I felt like I really held myself back mentally. And so fast forward and thinking, okay, if I could talk about anything like these coaches talk about softball, or like you guys talk about gymnastics, I'm sure it's, what would it be? And it's figuring out a way to get people from island A to island B. Like, you say you want this, how do we go get it? And how do we conceptualize these ideas and turn them into motion versus just sitting on them? And I think that's a lot of times the challenge. So what are you currently working on? Like, where are we at? I know you said you're coming off a retreat. What's going on right now?
Yeah, so we just got the team back together. Last week was our first week of practice and team meetings and things like that. We went on our team retreat. So right now we are in our like 8-hour weeks where we're allowed to mandate 8 hours of activity. And then at the end of September, we will truly start our full 20-hour weeks of practice. But for all intents and purposes, we're in our preseason right now. And so a lot of what we're focused on is really building a solid foundation for our culture this year, and our leadership this year, and the gymnastics as well, and the strength and conditioning. We approached our first big challenge last week when they had a conditioning test day one, and not everyone passed it. And so right now they're figuring out as a team, like, how do we learn from that? How do we get past it? How do we pass it? And so we're really just building our foundation that is strong. And then if they're being become cracks in our foundation, how do we repair them as a team? And so we can improve the gymnastics. We can get ready for season that starts in January with a plan and a culture that is really strong. So that's what we're focused on right now. And obviously doing a ton of recruiting as a staff, and football games will bring out lots of recruits. So I'm very excited as well for that. But it's an exciting time for the program because I've never had a team so far that was as hungry to achieve more success than our team this year. I'm really excited about that. That's really what I felt coming away from the retreat, a lot more hunger than I've ever seen or felt. So I'm really excited.
That's amazing. Yeah. I bet that fires you guys up too, because it just wants you to keep building off of that and taking advantage of that. For you as a human, what is something that's like non-negotiable for you during your day? Obviously, as an athlete, how you fuel yourself, your mind, your body, your spirit, it really has a direct correlation in your performance and that preparation for your performance. What is it as a head coach? What are non-negotiables? What's a routine for you? Are there certain things in your day that you really try to stick to keep yourself grounded and centered?
I don't know if it's every day, but I guess a daily one would be like for me, and I try to enforce this as culture within the program, even with the coaching staff, but just like no complaining or talking badly about whether it be a student athlete I'm just really frustrated with or annoyed with or whatever. If I catch myself just complaining about it, then I go, okay, wait, all right, maybe that's frustrating, but what am I going to do to help them? Or what am I going to do to solve the problem so that I don't create this culture where we just have coaches meetings where we're complaining about the athletes, or then we model to the athletes that complaining and gossip or whatever is okay. So that's a non-negotiable for me, is just like a very solution-oriented approach to anything that happens and figuring out how can we help everyone on the team and as quickly as possible. And then for me, more on a personal note, like I think I'm always telling my athletes to find things they can do throughout their day to make sure they're taking care of their mental health. That's important to me as well. I'm not the best at it, but I do go to therapy and make sure I go to Pilates every now and then and really take time. I walk my dog every night. And as a head coach, I could literally find something to do every single second of the day. There's like never ending work, but it's important I take that time so that I can be at my best for the student athletes. So I got to take care of me first, like that whole oxygen mask metaphor. I literally told one of my student athletes that the other day, and I have to remember to take my own advice sometimes, but it's something I strive to do.
Yeah, that is so huge. We hear that metaphor, but I think it's so hard for women to conceptualize sometimes, because if I'm a mom and a partner and I'm running a household and I'm doing this job, then I have to put everybody first, or I'm selfish, or I'm self-centered. And one of the things that I find through this work and through like performance coaching is I can clearly tell when I'm working with somebody that has an athletic background and one that doesn't, because it feels more guilty to the person that doesn't, because the athlete has this idea that it's not selfish because it makes me better for my team, and my team could be my family, my team could be work. And so I love that you shared that you're in therapy and you walk. And I think that hopefully that's being more normalized, that no matter where you're at in your career, like you're still human and you can still grow and you can still use the people around you as a really valuable support system.
Yeah. It's not a stigma in our program to do counseling and handle your mental health and really take some ownership of it, which I'm really proud of. It's not perfect by any means, but it's definitely, I hear all the time from the athletes like, oh, it's just so normal to go see the psychologist. And I'm like, yes, because the culture in gymnastics up until college typically is like, you suppress everything, you push it down until one day you can't anymore and it explodes. And I just don't love that culture. And I don't think it's a healthy way to prepare them for life after gymnastics. And so that's another thing I'm like, I got to teach that within my program so that they have the tools they need when they graduate to be functional and successful.
Yeah. We definitely need more Jordyn Wiebers around. Holy crap. This was awesome. My final question for you is, what does it mean to you to be a woman in the arena?
I think it means to me just not being afraid to put yourself into spaces or take a leap of maybe you don't feel fully ready to do something, but you try it anyway, and not being afraid to fail at it. And I think that's what I did when I took this job. And I love that quote from, I don't remember who wrote the quote. Who wrote the quote? Do you remember?
No, it's from a movie. I think it's from a movie, The Man in the Arena, right?
I thought it was a quote, Man in the Arena.
I remember it from the movie, not the quote, but I just remember Brene Brown first. Do you remember when she did a Zoom that we were all a part of? And I remember sitting in the auditorium in the Jones Center, and I just first heard this idea of the arena and I was like, yes, I want to be there. I want to stay in that space. I don't want to be on the sidelines watching somebody do what I think I could possibly do.
Yeah. There's a whole quote from her book, Daring Greatly. And the quote has the words daring greatly in it. And to me, it's all about just having no regrets, saying, hey, I'd put myself into those spaces and I tried it, even if I knew I wasn't going to know everything about it. And one of my early mentors or people that I felt like pushed me to get to where I am now gave me a book. It was Lean In. And then she said, we need more women in leadership positions in sports. And I really processed that and said, okay, I want to be one of those women. I want to be in a head coaching position so I can be an example to other young people or women that want to be in a head coach position and think they might not be able to or think they might not be good at it. So just taking a risk and being courageous and brave in that way and daring greatly. I guess I'll quote Brene Brown herself because I love her. But yeah, I think that's what it means to be in the arena for me.
Yeah, amen to that. So thank you so much again for your time, making time to share your story and share the things that you've learned that's been effective for you, not only you personally, but also your program and the people around you. I think just they're so lucky to have you. And I'm thankful that you're in my network and you agreed to be here. So thank you.
Paige, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I hope today's episode inspired you on your journey in the arena. Make sure to check out the show notes in the description for a rundown of today's show with all the important links. If you enjoyed this, please share with a friend. I know how much it means to me when my friends share podcasts. Leave us a review and let us know it landed with you over on Instagram at Paige_Rene15. As always, your best bet is on yourself.